So welcome everybody to the GitLab 10.8 kickoff. And so today we're going to talk about some of the awesome features that we are planning to work on, or actually have already started to work on in 10.8. So there's a lot to get to, so I'm just going to jump right in. So if you're looking at the doc, the first section is the discussion section. And so within the discussion world of GitLab, we're focusing on portfolio management, and right now that means epics and roadmap specifically. So we're really excited because as of 10.7, we've already shipped or are planning to ship the comment thread within an epic. And so you'll be able to add comments, you'll be able to have a discussion, start a discussion, and have an inline threaded discussion within an epic, exactly the same as issues and merge requests. What we won't be able to do in 10.7 yet is having notifications and to-dos, as I'm sure a lot of you on the line are used to already for issues and merge requests. So we know that's going to be a highly requested feature and demanded feature, so we're working on it right away, and we plan to ship it in 10.8. On the roadmap side, we're going to bring searching and filtering, similar to how you can also search and filter on labels, on the actual content of an issue description or a title, filtering by the author, and so forth. So we're going to bring labels, we're going to bring searching the content, author, and so forth. What we already have on the epics list page, we're going to bring that onto the roadmap page. And for the roadmap page, how that's different from the rest of GitLab, or how that's unique and new, is that we have a visualization in time. So it's something that we really haven't really done in the past with GitLab. You can think of maybe the Burndown chart as an exception, but really this is the first time we've done that. So we're going to iterate on that concept and allow people or users like yourself to be able to see or to scroll forward, backward in time, or to shrink and expand. And so we're going to have a design, and we're going to have a first iteration of that in 10.8. Burndown chart for group milestone is something, again, that's often requested. It says ultimate right now. That's incorrect. I'm going to change that to premium in real time here. And so we've had the Burndown chart for a while for project milestones. We recently, not that recently, a good number of months ago, released group milestones. So we wanted to bring a lot of the project milestone features to group milestones, and Burndown chart is one of the oft requested features. So we're working on that in 10.8. We're also working on some search capability in the global search, advanced global search, so the search bar at the top right corner of GitLab, and we want to bring some features. For example, searching by file name, we want to support that syntax and allow you to do that. So we're going to have that feature in 10.8, and with or without Elasticsearch. So if you have Elasticsearch, you get the benefits of it. If you don't, the feature will still work. Other features are just viewing the sum weights of an issue board column, batch commenting, something that we've started to work on a couple of releases ago, some of the technical underpinnings of it, and we're going to continue to work on that in 10.8. And something that's a little bit newer in our process is we're scoping work specifically for design ahead before we actually do the development work, because as GitLab grows and scales, we're working on these big, bold designs and features. And so we want to afford our designers a little bit more time to think bigger picture. And so we're still going to do iterative development work in small iterations, monthly iterations, but that doesn't mean we're not going to design big and bold. And so that if you click on that link, you'll see some of the great things we're working on. In particular, approvals is a big one within the merge request epics. And another big one is the team dashboard, we're calling it right now. So what that essentially is for the engineering managers at GitLab, it's very difficult, or it becomes increasingly harder to assign issues and schedule issues month to month as we grow. And there's been a lot of pain there. Folks are using different tools, and we want to bring that process within to GitLab. And so we're working on the design for that as well. So do check out that by clicking on the link. Fabio, tell us about CI/CD.
Yeah, thank you, Victor. Very interesting seeing how it will go with roadmaps and epics, since we are heavily using them for our internal processes. Yeah, let's talk now about CI/CD and what we are gonna work in 10.8. So first item I want to mention is incremental rollouts. As you already know, we are moving by iterations, and so this is the first iteration that will allow people to manually do incremental rollouts with variables. So when you have a new version of your application and you want to deploy it in production, replacing the current one, most of the time you don't want to do a full replacement in one shot, but you want to allow a few pods to be updated with the new version and then evaluate if there are problems or if it's working well, and then scale the deployment up to 100% of the rollout. This is something that we are aiming to have, and for the first iteration, people can specify and control in the UI this process. In the future, we are planning to allow people to specify rollout plans, and so this could be more automatic, but we want to get some feedback first on the first iteration. We are also planning to have very good improvements for our existing features. The second point I want to mention is that we will fetch available parameters directly for GKE when creating a GKE cluster. This is quite important because there are a few, for example, the project ID that is still not so simple to get from the GitLab interface. So users have to move into the GCP dashboard and find the information. Since we want to provide to users a very smooth experience inside the GitLab interface, we will fetch them for users and we'll present them in the UI. So they will just be to select the correct one they want to use, and they don't need to go on a different website anymore. Also, we want to improve our way to specify parameters when you run a new pipeline from the UI. So there is this feature that is already available. You can run a manual pipeline on your code, specifying the branch you want the run pipeline for. With 10.8, we are improving this feature, and users will be able to specify variables that will be just specific for that manual run. This will allow users to do different flows or to test some of the changes they want to test without affecting the generic behavior of the process of the project. It is also a first iteration in a different approach we are having to allow people specifying variables for all the manual actions and the manual things they can do with pipelines. So probably if this will have the proper traction, we will also allow people to specify variables in manual actions, so specific jobs, not just the whole pipeline. Then going further, we are also want to improve our auto DevOps script to allow people to define without altering the script, so without making it explicit, if they want to use a continuous deployment policy, or if they prefer to use staging by default and then have a manual action to deploy directly into production. At the moment, it is supported by the Auto DevOps template, but users should make it explicit into the project. It means that they will not benefit from further improvements and fixes that we release later. By using variables, they will not be required to make it explicit. They can just set up a variable in the project settings, and they can affect and they choose the deployment strategy they want to use for that specific project. Then we are also working to provide shared CI/CD runners for groups. This is a community contribution feature that we are working for a while. So we are mentoring and we are helping the developer, the contributor, to get it done. Now we are almost ready, and we want to close this story because shared runners for groups are very, very important when a company, for example, that is using a group as a unit of work, wants to provide runners that are not the shared runners available for everyone in GitLab.com, but they will be available to any project inside the group. So users that are creating a new group inside the a new project inside the group don't need to set up runners or to do any kind of configuration, they will automatically be able to leverage the ones that are at group level. And that is all for CI/CD. Let's see what's new for security products team in 10.8. We are moving on the very first iteration on license management. So you know that nowadays every project is relying on external dependencies and libraries. And these libraries and dependencies will bring their own licenses. We want that users are really aware of the licenses that are included in their projects, and they can approve or just review which is the policy they want to apply in order to avoid license problems and license mismatching when they are creating the application. So we are providing this license management by default in Auto DevOps template, and obviously we also show the results of this check, of this analysis, starting from the merge request widget as usual. So people will be able to see data there out of the box if they're using Auto DevOps. If they're not using Auto DevOps, they can still implement the same kind of job with the same specifications and get the feature as well. We are also increasing the SAST coverage for other languages that are very common and they are highly requested, but they are not part of the current offering yet. So in 10.8, we are going to implement SAST for Java Gradle and SAST for PHP. And the last thing I want to mention is that we are moving with the very first iteration on the signal to noise story. So when you have a security report and you have issues that you evaluated and you figured out that these issues are not really something you need to take care of because they are false positives, you will be able to dismiss them directly from the UI. This information will be collected by the system, will be stored permanently, and will contribute to give a better feedback also to other projects based on a sort of community score that will affect and will give more insights and more suggestions how a possible security problem is affecting your projects or not. And that's all for security products. So Jeremy, what about platform?
Thanks a lot, Fabio. There's one feature that I'm really excited to talk about, and it's related to group level SSO for GitLab.com. So in 10.8, we're going to continue to iterate on this feature. In 10.7, we're shipping like a very basic version in the first iteration of this, which is basically the ability to connect a GitLab.com group to a SAML identity provider and manage your group membership through that. We think this is a really important feature, and we're really excited to keep improving on this. So like I mentioned, in 10.7, users will be able to use an SSO URL, and they'll be able to gain access to connected groups on GitLab.com. But unfortunately, you'll need to manage and revoke memberships manually for the first iteration of this feature. In 10.8, what we want to do is we want to continue to iterate. We want to solve this problem and begin doing these revocations automatically, so that once a user gets removed from a connected identity provider, which is managing the user credentials for your particular organization, we want to go ahead and automatically handle the removal of these users and keep your access and notifications super secure. So that's all I wanted to talk about for group level SSO. James, over to you for the rest of the platform and Geo.
Thanks, Jeremy. In 10.7, we're making the Web IDE available in GitLab Core, and we're continuing to improve on that in 10.8 by adding access to CI pipeline status information. And this is really useful because when you make a commit, that's immediately going to kick off your GitLab CI pipelines. And it would be very useful to know when those pipelines pass or fail so that you can quickly respond to those failures and fix the issues that those pipelines find. Over the coming releases, we're going to continue integrating the Web IDE with GitLab CI/CD so that we're closing the loop between writing code and testing code in a much more synchronous fashion using the Web IDE. I'm also really excited that we're bringing push mirroring to GitLab CE. So for a while, we've had the mirroring capabilities, which allow you to take your repository and push it out to other Git hosts. So that might be an open source project that you're working on in GitLab and you want to mirror it to GitHub or a different GitLab server, push mirroring makes that possible. So all your changes as they are made in GitLab get pushed out to an external repository. So that is coming to GitLab CE in 10.8. I'm also really excited that we're going to be working on improving the performance of LFS integrity and repository size checks. Every time you push a commit to GitLab, there are quite a number of checks that run on every single commit. They're including permissions, but also we verify if all the LFS objects are present. So if you push a commit that contains LFS pointers, but there's no LFS objects, we'll reject the commit because you're pushing the commit, the repository into an inconsistent state. And so we're going to be improving the performance of that check, and we're also going to be improving the performance of the repository size check. In GitLab Premium, you can set limitations on how large repository is allowed to become, and we compute how big a repository is after on every push, and so we're going to make that faster. We've also got a range of bug fixes that touch forking and project import and export that we're going to be working on, which will be great for everyone who uses those features. On the geo side, which is a premium feature, we've got a number of continuing efforts from 10.7 around improving the performance of initial replication. So when you set up GitLab Geo, which replicates your GitLab instance into a different region, one of the first things we have to do is replicate all the Git repositories from your primary to your secondary server. And that initial replication is quite expensive because on the CPU, because each project has to be Git cloned or fetched. And that is CPU intensive on the primary and can cause particularly large projects with deep histories and lots of objects to be quite slow. And so we've seen in a number of cases that these fetches can time out. So we're going to be improving the replication speed of that. And we're also going to be looking at the verification of the secondary replicas, improving the extent to which we verify the repositories and making it an automatic process, and also looking at ways we can automatically resolve any discrepancies that we detect. So if a repository is inconsistent with the primary, making sure that we automatically recover from that situation. One of the great features of GitLab Geo is for distributed teams, where one team might be on the East Coast US and another team might be located on the exact opposite side of the world. So spinning up a secondary Geo instance in that other region will make Git much faster for that other team. But one of the limitations is that that's a read-only secondary. So you can't push back to the secondary. So your clones will be faster, but you still have to push all the way back to East Coast US, hypothetically. So what we're going to begin doing in 10.8 is adding the ability to proxy those pushes from the secondary back to the primary. So you can work with the same secondary Git URL for push and pull, and we'll proxy it back to the right location. And we're also continuing to work on hash storage in 10.8. We've got a number of ways that we're testing that and improving it. And one of the things that we'll be doing specifically is improving the logging for projects that have hash storage enabled, so that the logs show the project name and location, namespace, rather than simply the location on disk, which is now a hash. So it's much less useful when you're looking at the logs to read a hash. So we're including human readable information for debugging that. That's it from Geo and platform. What's monitoring up to, Joshua?
Awesome, thanks, James. Those are some super exciting enhancements to Geo there. Particularly the HTTP push and the performance improvements. I can't wait. Those are really exciting. On the monitoring side, we also have some interesting things coming up here as well. First off, we had a couple items that didn't quite make it all the way to 10.7, unfortunately. And so we'll be polishing those off and shipping them in 10.8. So we didn't quite get around to enabling the GitLab Ruby metrics now that they have been proven to be quite stable. We've been running them for quite a while now on GitLab.com. And so we feel quite comfortable turning them on by default. And we'll go ahead and get that done here in 10.8. We also, unfortunately, didn't quite get the alerting capabilities done. in 10.7. And so we'll be finishing that up and shipping that out here as well. So you'll be able to go ahead and set alerting thresholds on any metric that you've added to GitLab and go ahead and get alerts on those via email from GitLab itself, which is pretty exciting there to now get alerts from directly in the dashboard and have a really easy way to configure them as well. We also have some nice improvements coming to core here around the performance dashboard. So we'll be improving the popover UI that appears when you're mousing over a particular point in time on the charts. So we'll clean up a couple items there. We'll show you more along the actual kind of time series you're actually kind of hovering over, as well as some other minor cleanups there, as well as also addressing some bugs around timescales that might not match up and the popover itself as well. Looking a little bit more forward here, we want to go ahead and lay the groundwork for some really exciting features around being able to view the Kubernetes Pod Logs directly from within GitLab. I know myself when I'm interacting with some applications deployed to Kubernetes, one of the most common reasons I fire up the Kubernetes dashboard is to go ahead and check out what's going on with my pods. And it can be probably hassle to go ahead and turn on kubectl proxy and then open my dashboard. And so having that option to quickly and easily jump right into the logs from within GitLab will be really, really exciting. I personally can't wait for it. So in 10.8, what we're going to go ahead and do is we'll start now tracking the individual pod state and deploy boards. So right now we give you a summary view, but we don't actually know the individual state of the individual pods. So for example, what the pod ID is that perhaps failed or has been restarted or we're still deploying. And so we'll go ahead in this release, add that intelligence in the deploy boards, and that will then allow us to go ahead in the next release and actually allow you to click in those and then view the logs directly for that pod in the UI. So really exciting there. And along with kind of laying the groundwork for that track initial state, we'll also be tackling the design for how that pod log view should look. So we'll get that done here in this release to make sure we're cleared the way and can deliver that in the next release. Similar to the UX design we're doing for the pod logs, we'll also be looking to the UX design for integrating with the Jaeger tab. So essentially what we're looking to do is provide an easy way to pop open the Jaeger UI as a kind of initial MVC to see what's going on with tracing in your environment and being able to kind of have that bookmarked, ready to open button along with the rest of your environments there in the GitLab interface. And we'll, of course, have some other exciting improvements there for tracing in the coming releases here as well. So moving on to improvements we have for distribution, we have a kind of large grouping of things around trying to improve sort of the security process that we have around our packages. One of them, and perhaps one of the more commonly requested features, is the ability to separate out some of the sensitive or secret information you might have in GitLab.rb. And so, for example, you might put in there some of the connect strings. You may also put in some, perhaps some of the LDAP configuration as well. And that information could potentially have some sensitive information in it. And so what we want to go ahead and do is to separate those things out of the traditional configuration and encrypt them and treat them more as secrets. And so we're trying to get that done here in 10.7 and 10.8. But we also want to go ahead and increase the scope of our vulnerability scanner. So last release, we went through and we built an automated tool to go through and look at much of what we include in the Omnist package itself, look up the state of those and see if there have been any CVEs published against those versions. So that was a great benefit that we did last release. And in this release, we want to go ahead and expand the scope to also include additional software packages that weren't originally included. So we'll get and increase our visibility of what's going on. And we also want to go ahead and address the findings. We didn't find anything particularly urgent or critical in there that was kind of new out of this. But we want to go ahead and address these so we have a clean CI run, and that way we can make this more of a CI job that runs in general. And if failures occur, it then becomes more of a thing to look at, for example. Plus, it's always good to just go ahead and address these, even if they are irrelevant to your particular use case, for example, as well. So we'll go ahead and get those done also in 10.8. We're also looking to make some improvements to high availability, mainly around just reliability and making sure we put out quality releases for HA in particular. So one thing we want to do is go ahead and automate the testing of high availability. So we're going to go ahead and leverage some scripting to be able to stand up an environment that has HA turned on and then actually run GitLab QA against it. And so we can actually detect some challenges or potentially some issues earlier on the cycle than we perhaps otherwise would have. I also want to go ahead and address a couple of bugs surrounding some edge cases with HA as well. And that brings us over to our cloud native GitLab chart. So again, this is a kind of a area of GitLab that we're working on for a couple of releases now, and we're getting quite close. We had an alpha release last month, which was great, and we're going to continue driving towards beta here as well. One of the biggest areas holding us back from beta is object storage support. And so we want to go ahead and add in support for object storage as it's available upstream in CE and EE repositories. So for example, here, upload support was added in 10.7 and artifacts and traces are added in 10.8. But the fact that we're actually kind of living off the master branches of these means we can go ahead and take advantage of these essentially 2 weeks early. And so we want to go ahead and add object storage configuration support for these two as they arrive. Again, they get started uploads now, and in a short time here, hopefully also artifacts and traces. And that will really help to round out a lot of the support and functionality of GitLab when running and deployed via these charts. We also want to do some prototyping and some kind of taxonomy work of restoring from backup. We're changing where a lot of the data is stored for GitLab in these new charts. And so we want to go ahead and kind of inventory, what data is in a backup, where it needs to go, how it can get there, and then we can start to attack this in a more pragmatic way. And so we're going to start to do some more of that kind of groundwork here in 10.8 to prepare for more full support for restoring from a backup in later releases here. We also want to make it easy to go ahead and spin up a runner. And so we'll be adding direct support for the runner inside the charts in 10.8, as well as also allowing configuration of inbound and outbound email support. So right now we don't have support for these. So for example, reply by email doesn't work, nor does email generates emails on issue updates and things like that going outbound. And so we want to make sure we can add those, as they are pretty heavily dependent upon features, and we want to make sure we have those for beta. Finally, we're also working on a couple stretch goals here, and that is to enable registry and Mattermost for Let's Encrypt. And we're hoping this can be relatively easy and something we can include in this release. But the idea is to simply add the URLs for these two services on the SAN in the system request, and that we can go ahead and reuse much of the existing provisioning logic and simply request one cert with multiple URLs on it and use that for these services as well. So some exciting things here coming in distribution. I think some really exciting things here in general. 10.8 is looking to be the best release ever. We've got some amazing things coming in batch reviews for code reviews. We have some amazing improvements for the web IDE, and a lot of that's coming in core, right? So you get the web IDE in core, CI pipeline status, push mirroring in core, some really exciting things for larger orgs as well with group CI runners, some geo improvements like HTTP push and performance improvements, and of course, the exciting things there in monitoring and distribution. So again, 10.8, best release ever. Super excited for this, can't wait. And I'm sure we'll have some more exciting things coming up, of course, here in 11.0, which will be our next release. So thanks everyone for attending, and we'll talk to you for that 11.0 release as well.